All right. Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm John Wilker, the owner of 360 Conferences and organizer of 360 AnDev. Welcome to our third and final 360 AnDev One Shot for the main event. Hold on, for the main event next week. Hopefully, you all have grabbed your ticket. If not, there's still plenty of time, so I hope we'll see you there. Today, we've got Garima Jain presenting meaningful vector animation using Shapeshifter.
Hello, everyone.
I hope you've enjoyed these free one-shots. It's been fun to give back to the community and kind of test out and play with our options for virtual events. So that's been a learning curve for us, but it's been fun. So I'm excited for next week. So without further ado, enjoy the session. If you have reminder, if you have any questions, just type them in the event chat and Garima will answer them all after the session.
Hi. The title of this talk is Meaningful Vector Animations Using Shapeshifter. I am Garima Jain and I work for a company called Over, which is a photo and video editing app to place text over images, graphics over images, and so on. And I'm also an Android Google developer expert. So what is this talk about? So this talk is going to be a basic walkthrough of creating simple vector animations using Shapeshifter, and I want to highlight the part basic and creating simple vector animations because I'm myself a developer, and if you're expecting that there is going to be some complex animations in this talk, so I'm sorry, you're in the wrong place, because we're only going to do simple shape morphings and like very simple animations, and we're going to learn a bunch of things, that is like about SVG commands, about path morphing, about using this tool called Shapeshifter, and we're also going to look into Android vector drawables. So why am I doing this talk? I attended this talk from Alex Lockwood in Chicago, Reporto. Alex Lockwood is the creator of Shapeshifter tool that we're going to use in this talk, and the title of that talk was In-Depth Path Morphing with Shapeshifter. So I got really inspired by this tool, and I thought that this tool has a lot of potential and it can create simple animations with a lot of ease. And then my colleagues started implementing some cool animations, and they brought these animations into the Over app, which again inspired me to look a bit more into these vector animations, and that is what I did. And why should designers have all the fun? Like, developers can also bring in their creativity. So like when you have been working on a project for so long, maybe you need a mental break. Maybe in that time you can work on these little animations and bring a little bit more delight to your users, and that is what these Android vector drawables, animated vector drawables can do. Who is this talk for? So developers like me who like to play around with animations, and hopefully maybe some designers could learn at least something from this talk. But who am I kidding? Only wannabe designers like me might learn something from this talk. So that brings us to the first topic of this talk, that is vector graphics. So the first file format that we're going to deal with this in this talk is the scalable vector graphics. So what is a scalable vector graphic, or the SVG format? It's the executable based markup language which defines 2D vector graphics, and in comparison to bitmap image formats like JPG or PNG, SVGs can be rendered at any size without loss of quality. So this is how a basic SVG file looks like. We have a title, description, we have groups, and we have paths under groups, and some shapes, and so on. Vector drawable. So vector drawables are Android's way of defining vector graphics, which it defines within an XML. These can be defined using set of points, lines, and curves. And similar to SVGs, vector drawables also have a tree hierarchy like this. Like we have a bunch of groups and we can specify paths within those groups, and we can also specify clip paths within those groups, and so on. So this is a basic format of a vector drawable. We have this vector tag, and within which we have a path tag. So we're again talking about path tag. We just talked about vector drawable path, and a few moments back we also looked at SVG path. So what is the common thing over here? Probably I'm saying path many times, so it must be path. So what is this path like? Path is a set of commands which can be used to define a particular vector. And what is a vector? Vector is a shape. So let us look at various commands that we can use to define a path. So first is the M command, which is to move to a particular point, that is begin a path. Then we have LXY, that is draw a line to a particular point. Then we have C and X1, Y1, X2, Y2 and XY, that is draw a cubic Bezier curve to particular point XY using control points X1, Y1 and X2, Y2. And finally the Z command, which can close a particular vector. So if you want to learn more about these, you can go to this very interesting and in-depth article about icon animation techniques, which tells a bunch of icon animations in detail. So that brings us to the first type of command, line command. Let's try to create a simple vector using line commands. So this is basically a set of commands. We have mostly line commands, but also a move command because we want to start a path. So let us first move to this point 0, 6. Then draw a line to 0, 4, draw another line, another line, another line, another line, and so on. And finally we can close this path. We could also have used the Z command over here, and we have just created this plus shape using these path commands, and we end up with a vector over here. So now let's look at curve command. So this is a set of curve commands which we can use to create a moon like shape. So firstly we use the move command again. Then we use the curve to command. So in this case we go to this point 12, 11.1, 11.9, and we have these two control points which are depicted by these lines. So on we draw these various other curves, and we finally move back to the original point, that is 13.6. that is where we started from. We could again have used a Z in this case. So we have successfully drawn a moon shape, vector shape. Congratulations. So animated vector drawables. So we have done enough talk about paths, like we're drawing a plus path, we're drawing a moon, like, but where the hell are all the animations? So let's talk a bit about animations now. So we have one path and we have another type of path. Now we want to animate from one path to another. These kind of animations are called path morphic animations because we are morphing one type of shape into another. And how we can specify these kind of animations in Android is by using these animated vector drawables. Like Android has built-in support for these. So what an Android vector drawable is, it is basically an object animator, and we animate the part data property of an object using an object animator of this particular shape. So how we can do that is we can use this animated vector drawable compact to make it below API, I think 21 it is, yeah. So we create an Android vector drawable and export it into this format, XML format, or we can also start writing down this animated vector drawable directly in XML. So shapeshifter can be used to export these AVDs directly. So that is what we are going to do in this talk. So we create this animation, we set this animation on a view, and finally we start the animation. That is all we need to do after we have created this, like pre-processed everything. That is all we need to do, and these animations are going to be easily scaled to any size without any loss of quality, which is perfect. So let us, like I just talked about path morphing, so let us look at an example of path morphing and what is all this about. So this is what is path morphing. We are using path commands to create these different shapes, and we're morphing from one path to another. So if you see in this GIF, like we have a plus shape, we morph into a square and then into a circle, and finally back into a plus. So we're morphing. So let's see what's going on behind the scenes. And in order to do that, we're going to first look at morphing plus to square. So we have two shapes involved, like first is the plus and then is the square. These are the commands for it. So a square can easily be drawn using just 4 points, but I've already added a bunch of extra points to make it compatible with this path. And when I say compatible, in order for two paths to be compatible, each of those paths need to have same amount of commands, same number of commands, and they also need to have same type of commands. Like if it is a line over here, it should be a line, and the order of these points should also be semantically correct. And when I say semantically correct, we'll have a look at that when we do the actual walkthrough of creating various animations. So now that these two paths are compatible, we can easily put them into our AVDs and specify an interpolator, and the Android is going to interpolate between these 2 points, these 2 values, and we're going to get a smooth animation, subject to terms and conditions, of course. So the next part of the animation was like morphing a square into a circle, and this one is a bit tricky because a circle is specified by a few curves, and as you can see, these 2 parts are definitely not compatible because they definitely don't have same number of commands, and they also don't have similar type of commands. So in order to fix these things, it is a little bit tricky to do this with hand, and tools like shapeshifter come into a lot of help in these cases, and that's what we're going to do. We're not going to talk about how we can convert this to this kind of path to this path. We're going to leave that task to the shapeshifter, and then we'll see how we can post-process it to make it better. So without further ado, let us start a hands-on walkthrough of creating various animations, and the first one is the expand collapse animation. We can either import an SVG or a vector drawable to this tool, which is called shapeshifter.design, which I was talking about in the presentation. So let's do that. So I've actually exported 2 vector drawables from Android Asset Studio to this folder, and Android Asset Studio is a tool which helps us to import vector assets into our Android projects, and that is where I have exported these vector drawables from, and we can import this here. So this is going to be our first path, and we want to animate it to this. And in order to do that, we can add a type of path data animation. Okay, and this path data animation needs to animate from this path to this path. So we are going to copy these values from here, and from value we're going to add this as the to value. We don't need this path anymore. So let's see how it looks like. Yeah, it looks very pretty. Just kidding. don't worry, we can fix this. So as you can see, like this vector starts from here and this is the first point, whereas like in this one, this is the first point. In order for this animation to work properly, this point should actually overlap with this one, and this point should overlap with this one. And this is what shapeshifter is here for. It has the ability to shift points. So what we need to do is we need to shift this one a bit to the right. So let's do that, and we have done exactly that. Now let's see if it fixes our issue. It exactly fixes the issue. So we're done over here, and I like to add a bit of overshoot to this animation, overshoot interpolator, and let's see how it looks like. Start with this. Yep, exactly what I wanted. Now let us add a reverse animation to this. Drag it a bit here so that it plays a bit later. Reduce the duration, maybe this much is fine. So for the reverse animation, we're going to start with this path, the one we ended on, and we're going to animate back to this from value. So we put it inside the to value in this case. So let's see how this looks like. Of course, we also need to change the interpolator back to overshoot. Let's see now. Yep. This brings us to the end of our very first animation. I know this is a very simple one, but at least it is much better than the boring just swapping out assets. Or it might be better to just keep the assets if it gets too distracting. It depends upon your use case. Second animation for the stock. Let us have a look at these assets that I've gotten from designers. So this animation is called add to done animation. So you must have seen like this little animation or maybe assets like when you want to add to favorites or like something else. So what we want to do is we have this plus icon and we want to move this to this tick icon. And in order to create a meaningful animation, you need to think of a concept first. So in this case, let's think of a concept. So this vector, it has two lines, this like vertical line and an horizontal line. And this vector, even this one has two lines, that is this top part and this bottom part of the stick. And one concept would be that we could animate these two lines into these two lines. So now that we have already think of a concept, now we can implement this concept. And in order to implement this concept, we need to analyze the vector that is provided. So this vector looks exactly similar to what we discussed earlier in the presentation, whereas these are two vectors. So clearly these two vectors are not compatible with each other. So in such cases, what we can do is we can pre-process our assets so that the paths that we're trying to morph together, or the paths that we're trying to morph from one to another, are a little bit more compatible. Because shapeshifter can do some things, but it cannot like do everything for us. So what I've done is like in this case I've divided this vector into two vectors, and which is what we have here, the first vector and the second vector. Now I can easily morph this line into any of these vectors and the other line into another one. Now what we can do is we can export this particular icon as an SVG, and it's like I've already exported them to shapeshifter, because like there is a way to import SVGs as well to shapeshifter. So let us do that. Why does this happen to me every time? Yeah, start from scratch, and we want to morph to a tick, add layers. So this circle we do not want, so this is the first path, and this circle we can delete. So this we are not animating, we are animating group to group 1. So the first path, that is this horizontal line, we want to animate this to this slanting line. So let's do the same thing. We can add a part data to this, and I like my animations a bit slow, so first let's increase the duration of these animations to maybe 400. Okay, so I want to animate this to this. Let's get the path that we usually do. Let's add this here. Okay, so we're done with this part. Okay, now onto this part, we want to move this into this one. So let's copy this and let us add part data animation to this. Let's increase the duration, and inside the to value let's add this, and we do not need this. So let's see how it looks like now. You see, like, this particular path looks fine to me, but this one is like doing weird things. So what we can do is we can see what's the issue with this one. So the issue with this is again the same, like this one should start here, or so in order to do that I need to shift this like 1 and 2. So let's do that, 1 2. So now these two overlap perfectly. Let's see how this looks like now. Yep, this is exactly what I wanted. This is fine, but like, is it really looking like an animation? So the earlier talk that I mentioned, in that talk I saw a bit of a trick. That is, to this group we can actually add some rotation from value 0 to maybe, let's say, 360, and so let's move this here, increase this, and let's play this, and you see the pivot is wrong. So let us set the pivot. So because it is 2020, we can set the pivot of this group to be 10 and a 10. Let's see now. This looks much better. I think I like this trick. I think what might look even better to some people, at least me, is this. Let's play this again. Yeah, I think it would look good on mobile screen when we are not playing it with slow motion, and I like it as it is. So now what we can do is we can also add a reverse animation to it, which we always like to do. So this is what we're going to do. So from value becomes the final value in this case, and to value becomes the starting value in this case. So we've done this. For this, let's add another part data animation and do the same thing. To value becomes the start value, and from value becomes the end value. Yep, and let's add a rotation. I think it would be better if we rotate it in the opposite direction in this case. Let's see how this animation looks like now. This is the add part, and this is the remove part. This is the add part, this is the remove part. I think it will look good on when we play it on device. So in order to see that, I think I'll show you a GIF for that, so you feel a bit motivated to do this. But for now, let's start with our third and the final animation. reload the screen. Let's first look at the concept. So this is our concept. So this is an asset that I got from, again, our Android Asset Studio, and I imported it into Sketch. And I did have a concept in mind. So initially, actually, what I did was I started from this asset, and I thought like, and this animation is actually meant for clicking a picture, and when we have a fab, like if you click on that fab, I want to do a click animation. So initially, what I did was I thought like maybe I had seen this kind of animation somewhere over the internet, wherein like this particular path would morph a bit inside like this. So I created this asset from this. But then I thought, why not take it to the next level? So I instead added a bit of curves to this, like so that when the shutter closes, it closes within a curve. So this is my concept. And this animation, like as I said, like we first think of a concept and then we try to implement it, and this concept brings a little bit of meaning to what I'm trying to do. So that is why this is called a meaningful this talk is titled Meaningful Vector Animation, because like we need to also keep into mind meaning behind the concept that we're trying to do. We cannot just randomly animate things. This animation is meant to happen for a camera click. Maybe it would make more sense like if we do the actual animation first. So now you see here, like we have these paths and these are like straight lines, but these are actually curves. So in this case, we want to morph a line to a curve. So what we can do is I actually pre-process this to have a little bit of lesser points and stuff. The first asset is this one, and of course we do not have the color for it. And the second asset is this one, add layers. So let us borrow the color from here because I like it colorful. Yeah, okay. Now this makes me happy. Then we're going to do the similar thing. We're going to animate the part data, and we're going to increase the duration for this to 800. Okay, and let us play this to 400 milliseconds. All right, so this path needs to animate from this to this. So let's copy the end values, and these paths are not going to be compatible. Let's remove this one. So we're seeing a red line over here because these paths are not compatible. And there is a magic wand that we get with Shapeshifter. Shapeshifter can actually calculate how to fix these points and make them compatible automatically. And if you want to learn how to do that, you should really watch the talk like In-Depth Path Morphing by Alex Lockwood. So we just click this auto fix, and a few things should be fixed for us. I know this is not perfect, but we can still fix it even more. So in order to do that, I would like you to focus on first this path. Like, let's see how this looks without fixing. I think maybe let's focus on this one. Okay, let's play this again. I'm not sure if you see the issue here. this is the path we're talking about, this one. Well, I don't see an issue there. Let's look at this one. Yeah, so if you see in detail, the morphing starts from here, and this is actually again for the same reason. These paths should actually look a bit more similar, and these points should properly overlap with each other. So we're going to try to do that. So let us try like this one. So you see, like this starts a bit here. So this is because like this point is here, and while this should actually be here, and the fifth point should be here. So we have another thing that we can do with shapeshifter, that is add points. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an extra point here, and now the paths become incompatible because we have an extra point. And so similarly I should be adding another point but on this side in order for it to work. Now let's see, we have 4, 5, 6, and this 4 sort of starts here. Now our points look pretty much similar. Now let's see like if it changes this part in the animation. You see, this is like much smoother than what we had before. So similarly, we need to fix all of these parts to get better and smoother animations. So I'm not going to fix all these, so I have prepared an intermediate design wherein I've already fixed it all. I'm sorry for like a little cheat that I did. So this is me. I have already fixed everything, and let's leave that page. This is how it looks like now. Yeah, all these paths are now fixed and nothing starts weirdly, and every path is overlapping with the end animation. Now what we can do is, let's do the second part for this animation, that is the reverse part, which is a bit interesting in this one. So we do the same thing, we add this, we want to get to this value, and we need to start with this value. Yep. And we're also going to do our little trick. I see the pivot is already set. We're going to add rotation, and for the first half let's rotate it from 0 to 180. Add another rotation, and let's rotate this from 180 back to 0. Let's see how this animation looks like now. So do you like it? I think I like it. And if you'll play it on phone, this is going to play a little slowly, and this looks like the camera shutter is closing, and we can export this animation as an Android vector drawable. Let's try to explore the contents of this Android vector drawable that we just created. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it with Sublime. So this is how it looks like. So we have this animated vector tag at the top. Inside this we have a vector which has a group, and it has a path which is pretty big, because like it was a big path, it was a combination of multiple paths. Then we have the target path, our first target path, which is named as path, and it has an object animator which has a path data and a value from, and then a value to. This is the structure of like our object animator, that we animate its path data property. And then we have the reverse animation part data, animating from one part to another. And then we have these little rotation properties getting animated from 0 to 180 and from 180 back to 0. Now that we have finished creating all these like animations, let us get back to our presentation and let us see how they look like. I have little gifs for you and for you to see how they look like on the actual app. Okay. So let us now see a little bit of recap of various animations that we did. The first one was expand collapse animation, and this is how it looked like. The next one was add to done animation. This one was add to done. This one was done to add. Let's see this add to done animation in action, how it looks like on a device. So you see we have a little fab at the bottom, and when we click on it, we're changing between different states. The next one we saw was camera click with curves. This is how it looked like. Let's see how it looks like on a device. So we have this little fab capture an image icon, and once we click on it, you can see the animation play. I hope you like the animations that we just created. Now to the last part of this talk, I want to talk a little bit about the animations that we have done in Over. So to start with the very first one, our ex-colleague Nick Raud, he did a bunch of animations. The very first one was this projects icon in the navigation drawer. If you click on it, it's going to change its state to selected. And this animation was done by him without using shapeshifter. And let's see how it looks like. So these little mountains, they animate among each other. So we can do animations like this in shapeshifter, but it becomes a bit manual and hectic. He also did this another animation icon for templates, which looks a bit like this. This is actually also an Android vector drawable, and it is done by actually moving the scale up and down. Then Rebecca Franks tried her hands out on this like delete animation. So this is the layerless screen, and if you want to delete a particular layer, we can click on this animation delete icon, and then it opens up a little bit. So you see, so this brings me back to the point of meaningful animations, because in this case what we're trying to do is we're trying to delete a particular layer. So this bin opens up so that we can throw something in there. So it's not like that the top of the bin is spinning about, it's bouncing around. It's a very subtle kind of an animation to depict deletion. Next, she did this, like this is the drag handle, and if we lock a layer, we cannot drag that particular layer anymore. So let's see this. Once we lock a layer, this drag handle moves into a lock, and unlock a layer, this lock icon unlocks and then moves back to a drag. So this is what I'm talking about. If you didn't see it, this is drag to lock, and this is lock back to drag. So again, touching upon the meaningful part, like because we are unlocking, so that is why this unlocks first and then turns into a drag. So for this animation, Rebecca took some help from Nick Butcher. Nick Butcher was one of the main people involved when Alex Lockwood was trying to plan out doing this tool, Shapeshifter. And Nick Butcher sort of passed his knowledge to change this animation and make it a bit more smooth to Rebecca, and then she shared it with the team, and here I am from her team sharing it with you all. Next, I also tried my hands out on this filter animation. So the problem statement here was, you see there are a bunch of filters, and on tapping on one filter, we can actually edit the intensity. So this is the animation I did for this. So once we select a filter, you see the seek bar, this little small seek bar moves about its axis. So this depicts that, like, by clicking on this particular thing, user can change the intensity of filter, like there's a seek bar behind it. What's next from here? So you see this little animation for inspiration. I've also added a proper link where you can find a tutorial, in-depth tutorial for this particular animation, and I feel this is very inspiring. So the person who has done this tutorial, I think he uses Adobe Photoshop in order to pre-process. So pre-process is a step which is like mandatory. You need to pre-process your assets first, and then he uses shapeshifter to do this final animation, and it clearly shows the power of this tool. So for some more references and further reading, I really recommend this talk and a few blog posts which you can check out. The tools that I've used for this talk are Shapeshifter and SketchUp. And finally, thank you for sitting through this talk and for your patience. I really appreciate it, and if you have any questions, I'll answer them now.
Awesome. That was amazing. Thank you very much. I'm going to real quick while we do the first question. Kenneth Leong, sometimes when importing SVG to AVD, the resulting AVD may get a warning in Android Studio saying it's too complex as the path data is too long. My question is, how complex an AVD or animated AVD be before it affects performance?
Actually, we cannot really say how complicated it can be, and probably when Android Studio is giving us a warning, that is a sign that it is complicated. So if it is, if we're talking about, like, we talk about two things, like if it is an SVG or like the vector drawable that is complicated, then we can probably try to look at various other options, like instead adding it as a PNG, like. And if it is an animation, then also we can probably look at other options, like maybe doing it via Lottie or like using something more complex in that case.
Awesome. Anyone else have any questions before we sign off? I threw up a slide to remind everybody that one, Bugsnag is participating in 360 AnDev. They're one of our amazing sponsors. They've got a session and two demos set up for next week. So make sure to drop in and say hi to them and thank them for supporting community events like this. It's a big deal. Final countdown on questions. Oh, how can we loop animations? Francisco Andrade asks.
How can we? I think there should be an option. I think I tried out this a while back, but there should be an option to loop an AVD. Otherwise, like I did see that option in Shapeshifter. So yeah, we can probably find it out, and there should be a way.
Unmute myself. Cool. And then Layla asked, is there a way that we can get the slides and links that you shared? I do have the slides, and we'll share them out over Twitter, as well as a link to this video, probably maybe later today or Monday.
And also, I'm planning to share all the assets, like the assets that I start with, so that like you all can try out all these animations yourself. And like I'm looking forward to you all posting the end results of those animations, probably on Twitter or somewhere, and we can all have fun together playing those animations.
Awesome. Let's see. Any final questions from anybody? I don't see any. Well, thank you, Garima. We will let you go. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this third and final 360 AnDev One Shot. I hope that you will join us next week for the main event, 360 AnDev 2020 Online. We've got 2 full days packed with some great sessions and some fun non-technical stuff to break up the day as well, so that nobody gets too much Zoom fatigue. And with that, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Thanks.
By the way, if you're still here, I forgot. Chuki just reminded me. We have game night. It's a practice game night for 360 AnDev. The main one will be next week, but we have one tomorrow night, Saturday. You can see it linked on the 360 AnDev website schedule. Free to join. It'll be fun. It'll be a neat way to a new take on game night, since we're all in our homes. Oh, Chuki just pasted the link to the schedule as well in the chat. So if you're still here, take a look at that real quick. Hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. It should be a lot of fun.